Okay, so here's where we're at. The Texas Revolutionaries, in early 1836, they control Goliad. Sam Houston has reinforced Goliad with about 500 men under the command of Fannin, the person that smuggled slaves from Cuba into Texas. San Antonio is in the hands of the Texas Revolutionaries. It had been recaptured in December from General Cos. By the way, General Cos marched down to Mexico and he promised not to fight again, although I think his troops ultimately did fight again. So San Antonio is in the hands of revolutionaries and Gonzales as well. But San Antonio and Goliad are the big prizes. Um, Sam Houston ordered Jim Bowie to go to San Antonio and to take the troops, the Texas troops that were in San Antonio, and to join Sam Houston's army in an area a little bit east of where Austin is now. But Jim Bowie refused to do it. He decided on his own volition, no, I'm not going to blow up the Alamo. Sam Houston asked him to blow up Mission Valerio, which of course is going to become famous as the Alamo soon. He just decides to do it. Jim Bowie decides that it can be defended, and so he defies Sam Houston, and the Texans remain. A few hundred Texans remain in San Antonio, as Santa Anna's 5,000 man army is getting closer and closer to San Antonio in early 1836. Now, Jim Bowie or Jim Bowie, very interesting guy. Um, I always heard that the great rock singer David Bowie named himself after Jim Bowie. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've always heard. So I'll throw that out there, but I won't test you on it. He was from Louisiana. He was a slave trader in Louisiana. He and his brothers were very, very active slave traders. In fact, they used to trade in slaves from Galveston. They would smuggle slaves that had been uh, um, captive and had landed in Galveston. He would smuggle these slaves into the United States. He was a land swindler. He Before he came to Texas, he forged a bunch of documents that seemed to indicate that the Spanish governor, remember, Spain had controlled Louisiana up until around 1803. And Jim Bowie forged these documents in which the Spanish governor supposedly gave land to his Jim Bowie's and his brothers. But it was very clear that the signature of the Spanish government had been forged. It wasn't, the person that was trying to sign off on it, the U.S. government official. I mean, it was obvious to him instantly that this was a fraud. If this had gone through, Jim Bowie would have been one of the largest landholders in the country. But this fraud was unsuccessful, and he didn't get the land that he was trying to get. He comes into Texas for one step ahead of the law to start over, as did so many Texans like Sam Houston. He's actually welcomed by elite Tejanos. He's marries into the elite Averamendi family of San Antonio. And I'm not going to spell out Veramendi. It's on the outline, and it's also Forget the Alamo talks about that. So Jim Bowie, this slave smuggler, this land swindler, he comes into San Antonio. He's welcomed with open arms by Tejano elites, and he does what many Anglos did during this period. He establishes himself in San Antonio and in Texas by marrying into an elite Tejano family, the Veramendi family. Um, Tragically, though, by 1836, though, um, Jim Bowie's wife had died and his children had died in a cholera epidemic. And Bowie himself was pretty sick by the time the Alamo battle occurs in February and March of 1836. So so Jim Bowie He's ordered by Sam Houston to blow up the Alamo, to retreat from San Antonio, to consolidate his forces with Sam Houston's forces. He decides not to do it. Um, and we are in early 1836. Okay. Into this context ride two people. First of all is William Barrett Travis. William Barrett Travis, who the book talks a lot about, he has been assigned to be the commander of San Antonio. He has very, very little military experience, but he's made a name for himself. He's one of the war dogs that had helped push Texas towards a revolution. And he arrives in San Antonio with his slave, a man by the name Joe, who, by the way, Joe would survive the Alamo. He was not killed at the Alamo. He was there, but he was not killed. The Mexican soldiers didn't kill him because they knew he was a slave. So William Barrett Travis arrives and takes command of the Alamo, or tries to, but Travis and Jim Bowie hate each other, and they just do not get along at all. And so it's a very unstable situation. Uh, there are two other groups that you've got in San Antonio. First is the people surrounding Juan Seguin. Once again, as you know, was a close associate of Stephen F. Austin. He supported the introduction of slavery into Texas. He wanted Texas to become part of the global cotton economy. And he decides to throw his lot in with the Texas revolutionaries. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him. And turns out to be a disaster for him after the Texas Revolution, but I don't want to get ahead of the story. He decides to support the Texas Revolution because he's a Federalist and he doesn't like the fact that Santa Anna is a centralist. So he supports the Texas Revolution on those grounds, on the grounds of federalism, that Santa Anna has become a centralist dictator, and that as a Federalist, Seguin is going to join with the Anglos that are fighting Santa Anna. So that explains why Seguin and a number of his followers decide to fight against Santa Anna. That there are probably a dozen or so Tejanos that fight in the battle against Santa Anna. It's not just Anglos versus the Mexican army. You do have some Tejanos that are allied with the Anglo revolutionaries. And then also, coincidentally, Davy Crockett comes onto the scene. Davy Crockett from Tennessee, he actually hated Andrew Jackson. He was on the other side of the political fence as Sam Houston. Davy Crockett had been a very successful politician. He actually arguably was the first celebrity in the history of the United States. He was famous for being famous. He was in plays in New York. He was a frontiersman. He adopted this frontiersman persona that urban America just loved. People in big cities loved Davy Crockett because he was exemplified the American frontier, and Crockett played it up to the hilt. He gained quite a bit of celebrity. He was elected to Congress, although he was defeated. And he comes into Texas with a group of his followers, about 40, and he ends up in San Antonio. But again, he did not come to San Antonio to die. He just kind of was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you have four kind of factions in San Antonio. You've got Travis, is ostensibly the commander of the Texas forces. Jim Bowie has his followers, a few dozen. He and Travis hate each other. They just cannot get along. You've got Juan Seguin's Tejanos who are willing to fight against Santa Anna. And then out of nowhere, Davy Crockett shows up with his group of about 30 or 40 Tennesseans. And Crockett serves as a bit of a mediator between Jim Bowie and William Barrett Travis. So you've got this very kind of unstable scene in San Antonio where you've got four kind of factions who, in theory, are a united army, but in reality have just arrived there or don't even get along. And all the while, Santa Anna is marching up from central Mexico. He crosses the border a little bit west of Laredo towards the Eagle Pass, kind of in the San Juan Bautista area, and he's heading towards the Alamo. And Tejano spies, they go to William Barrett Travis and they say, "Look, man, you've got a problem. You know, Santa Anna's army is heading this way." But Travis didn't believe them. Travis was deeply racist. He thought the Tejano spies were really spies for Santa Anna, that they weren't on his side. And he just ignores the intelligence that he gets that Santa Anna is marching towards San Antonio. And the other thing that happens is as Santa Anna marches towards San Antonio, he issues what's called the Tornell Decree. Tornell was his attorney general, and the Tornell Decree basically gives Santa Anna permission to kill everybody in his path. That the Texas Revolutionary Santa Anna, the Tornell Decree says, but Santa Anna wrote it, are land thieves, they're pirates, and that the only way to deal with pirates is to execute them. So basically, Santa Anna, as he marches up towards San Antonio, he's already decided to execute every Texas revolutionary defender that he can get his hands on. And again, you know, this had happened in 1813. He was a veteran of attacking Texas. He'd been a young officer in 1813. So this was really nothing new to him. So what happens is Santa Anna's armies kind of spread out. The army that appears in Santa Anna, I'm sorry, in San Antonio after mid-February 1836 is really the infantry. And the cannon, the heavy artillery that can really do the most damage, the cannon are the last of Santa Anna's army. The artillery, they're the last to arrive. In fact, they don't even arrive until after the battle. And so what happens is Santa Anna finally reaches San Antonio in February 22nd, 1836. And one of the eyewitnesses has an account. February 22nd used to be Washington's birthday. I guess maybe it still is, but there used to be a big celebration. And the defenders of the Alamo had they had partied the night before. They had got drunk, many of them. They had pawned their weapons. And then the next day, one of them drags themselves up to one of the towers at San Fernando Cathedral and looks towards the UTSA downtown campus where it is now and spots the vanguard of Santa Anna's army. And they realize, oh my gosh, we are in trouble now. Here comes the Mexican army. And then Travis makes a fateful decision. Instead of leaving San Antonio, he decides to defend the Alamo. He decides that all the Texas defenders, a little less than 200, what they would do is instead of retreating, they would try to fight Santa Anna by going into the Alamo and by defending the Alamo and by stopping Santa Anna by defending the Alamo. And we know how well that turned out, but I'll talk about that in the next podcast.